right.
Okay. Yep, here we go. So I just wanted to let everybody know that this is a very visual presentation, and in part because I want you to feel the despair and also feel the empowerment. So I just have to say, oh no, what is going on here? Here we go. So things really changed for me and for a lot of people on the island after Hurricane Maria. That was September 20th on 2017. Just the amount of devastation that it did was incredible, and nothing I've ever experienced. I wasn't even on the island. I was actually in California doing a sabbatical and like across the bay from the fires. And so what it really did to me was make me realize, wow, we really have to do something about climate change. There's really, it's happening everywhere. But that's not that's not the motto here. So I wanted you to see what the devastation looks like and why this devastation is so horrible. And so part of it is that in Puerto Rico, everybody knows about the beaches. What they don't know is in the middle, you have a lot of mountains. It's actually very mountainous and very rugged. And so you have like these little 2-lane roads and even 1-lane roads that go up the mountains and around the mountains and squiggle through the mountains. And so tons of water, what it does is damage the infrastructure to the point that nobody on this little mountaintop could actually have access. Here, the bridge was completely devastated. This was the most devastation on the island and the most sensitive. It's called Utuado. It's in the very middle of the island. And this is just to show you the other side. And so this is an article here that I've timed how Puerto Ricans get creative to survive. And it just has wonderful examples, because what happened was the funds didn't come. Got stuck in politics, it got stuck in everything, and people had to actually fend for themselves and fend for their neighbors. And this makes me really. And so then there was this whole false news narrative that there was only 16 people who died from the hurricane, and everybody knew it was very different. And this came to life for me because I was saying, hey, how great that Puerto Rico only had 16. I was touting about it on Facebook, and my friends were like, Patty, everybody knows that's a false figure. And I was like, what? How could the president be doing false news? And it's become too much of a reality now. But so what ended up happening is that they wouldn't release the data. They wouldn't make it open to the public. And so there was no way to make calculations or estimations. And finally, this is one of the themes of what I'm trying to show, is that we need collaboration with top research universities. Luckily, one of our alums is actually a biostatistician at Harvard, and a very famous biostatistician named Rafael Irizarry. And there's also very lucky that he has a professor that had been doing research in psychology on the island and had connections to psychologists who were actually on the ground doing surveys of mental health of people, that they were able to do this incredibly fast survey to get an estimate of the number of deaths. And there were estimates from New York Times, there were estimates from an independent producer on the island. There were lots of estimates, but when this one came out, what it did was it forced the governor, because CNN actually interviewed the governor, it forced the governor to actually make the data public. And this was actually a wrong estimate, but this is the number that, it was an overestimate. And when he did the estimate, he actually showed the standard deviation, that it has a huge standard deviation. This is based on only 30. He gave a whole bunch of explanations, but the number stuck. And right there was when I saw the power of data science, right? And I teach this to my students all the time. This number is not the accurate number. It's actually 3,000, which was calculated by the government later on. But if this study had not been done, and it had not been done from, Harvard, which has this incredible reputation, it would have never changed the course of history in Puerto Rico. So what this actually led to was in 2019, massive protests as a result of seeing the lack of infrastructure. This is basically a third of the island came out from all classes to protest the governor and his managing of the hurricane, as well as his tweets that came out. So he had a chat that came out, and everybody was horrified. And I think a lot of it had to do because there were comments there mocking the number of people that had been dying and stacking up in the morgue. There was only 2 people that were doing autopsies at the time to certify deaths. So just to show you the power of a number. And I just also want to share with you, like at the end of the day, it rained. And this is just, it was such an incredible day for so many people. I get emotional on this. This is really weird. So anyway, also creative ways that people protest. It's funny because I normally don't, like, I think I'm over that, but it's still, it's traumatic. And now what I want to show you is actually stuff that happens here. 2017, this article came out, is Puerto Rico being ethnically cleansed for the super rich? Like, people were starting to wonder, like, is this why the money isn't coming? Because without that money, people were basically losing their livelihood. The infrastructure wouldn't let them go to work. It was horrible. And so many deaths were lost that didn't need to be. And if you look up Rafael Irizarry's research, he also did, after he got the correct numbers, he compared Hurricane Maria to all the other hurricanes in the United States. And it was by far, not only, initially the impact wasn't as many, but as time progressed, it lasted for an entire year, the impact and the number of deaths. Also, this was another thing that happened. 2018, you see, basically people started coming to try and create a crypto utopia in Puerto Rico. And right now, cryptocurrency is actually, it wasn't approved by the government, but these people are coming and they're doing it. And this basically was an article last week, the one on the far right, the rush for a slice of paradise in Puerto Rico, talking about the entire thing of buying up the lands, the beach lands, the prices going up, and now pushing out people. It's basically an island-wide gentrification. Now, that's not the only thing that was happening on the island. So I want to show you this because I want you to see the number of academic year interruptions. So I hope I'm getting the despair part. So 2016 financial crisis, basically Puerto Rico was not able to pay its debts to, I don't remember who, so I just put 2. But it has to do with Wall Street and hedge fund people. So the idea was, now, how is the government going to stop? They basically went into default. A fiscal board came in called Promesa. And basically since then, the fiscal board has been deciding the amount of money allocated to education in Puerto Rico. In 2017, they attempted to close the public universities. There are 11 public universities. That led to, they wanted to close 8 of them. And that led to a 70-day protest by students where everything was shut down and we had to teach through the summer, as we also, did other work that we had to do through the summer. In the fall of 2020, the hurricanes came. So that was, I never saw the other stuff as part of systemic racism. Now I kind of start to see it that way, as I'm seeing like how these people are coming in and taking over. And then 2018, that's the influx of investors and increasing disparity on the islands. 2018 also was a time where blackouts and earthquakes due to fracking offshore started to happen. And 2019, the summer governor, I say sees, but it's sees the light, but I forgot to put the light. And then basically you have the early pandemic in 2020. So I wanted to show you this because what's really important is to understand that our students have not had a normal semester. There are students now that are graduating that have not had a normal semester. And that makes them super resilient, right? But it also does another thing, which it basically has taken an opportunity for them to meet a lot of people, do a lot of stuff. And so how did we cope with this? Basically, we had gotten a grant from NIH. I put the link there so you could see it in 2015. And at that time, I said, we got to do hackathons and start increasing diversity. And it was all about, getting computational science. Well, little by little, what started to happen is, we did a symposium. We started to do like how to create health informatics. We knew we wanted eventually, and in this we had our first hackathon, which was basically how can we fix health on the island, and it was a big hit. It started to do more inter-university collaborations, and we got our collaborators from the US, a lot of our collaborators from the US to come. And I have to emphasize it needs collaborators, and I say this to you because all of you might be at really at a very good university like we are, but we serve as an intermediary to other universities going up and going down. So we are connections to R1s, and we're also connections to the local, and that connection needs to be strong. And so this stuff, at first I started doing this more to get the connections on the to the rest of the island, and so it's had this huge effect. And then the hurricane happened. So the hurricane happened, and so what we did instead, we switched to actually solving problems. How can we do? What can we do to because basically when everything went down, there was no way to get data and communicate. So let's talk about how we can build ad hoc networks and how do we work with that data. Nobody in that, we brought, somebody from Ushahidi. They didn't make it as part of the hackathon, like, because I was working with other people because they couldn't see the importance of, hey, okay, let's get everybody to communicate, but what do we do with the data? And I showed this because these events actually started opening them to the public, started making it easier for people to understand. Data Carpentry did a lot for us. We worked with them basically to start training on our university, but also they started doing training, like we put those trainings at the same time that we had the hackathons, and so they became like judges for the replicathon. And so these initiatives at other universities are so important. I also put Women in Data Science because that actually is an initiative from Stanford. And that initiative is helping us actually to break the bounds of, when I used to say I want 50% women at a hackathon, people would laugh. And now, thanks to this initiative by Stanford, that's completely changing. Now they listen to me when I do, okay, Patty, go do your thing. Like, it's that kind of thing. And then the really interesting thing that we find, it's like how now that we could get the students and we can get them thinking more collaboratively, how do we get the professors to do computational science? How do we get them at the hackathons? And so we started doing them. We created an REU called the IQ Bio REU. And that REU basically had one hackathon, well, actually several hackathons. We put the replicathon in there that we did. And so we built their confidence in participating in that. And so these are basically examples of our calls. But what I wanted to show, like, this was now initially a collaboration between computer science and biology. Now biology is doing it by itself, which to me is great because we're still collaborating, but they're leading it, which means now we have, and on top of that, they've maintained the 50-50. Normally this is because we had so many men applying more than women. We said, well, we're going to keep it according to what the applications are. And there was 60% women. No, I'm sorry, according to applications. So I said that wrong. What happened was when we first let everybody just do the judgment, it ended up, it was a predominantly male group. And then we said, no, if the applicants are 60-40, then we're going to make it 60-40 in the cohort. And so that's one big thing that we did different. And so again, what we did that was different, we tried to go interdisciplinary, inter-university, intersectoral with these. We tried to make them more collaborative, less intense, so 24 to 36 hours, give them better food. I think that makes a difference too. A lot of publicity saying that the event's for everyone, very much a focus on women, trying to make sure that every team has a woman. And then bringing extraordinary mentors. And then what we did was use the hackathons and replicathons to train and bring faculty to the datathons. So we basically started with hackathons. A replicathon basically is just, it's an exercise where they learn how to do data science. I didn't explain that before, but it's basically, they come, we give them 2 articles and we give them data. We train them on how to use it. It's basically it's a preconceived thing that we did with Rafael Irizarry's lab with his PhD students. And so we make them go through that, and they compete on how to present their ideas. So it's really more of a communication and coding thing, like to say, hey, how do I communicate my science to prove a point? And then finally, now we're doing datathons. I just want to show you with the REU, we originally submitted what's on the right, but what happened is, as all these things were happening, we started to realize that we couldn't just bring students, because we also did 50% local and 50% from abroad. But we also realized we had to start doing justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion nights, so that the students, because they were there when when the revolution, when half of a third of the island is protesting. So we needed to start telling them about what was happening. And so, but this has stayed. And what now, we added these Jedi movie nights where we'd see a movie and talk about, justice, equity, and diversity. So we've picked movies that dealt with those themes. And also we tried to change mindsets. So trying to tell them what growth mindset versus fixed mindset is. So that's stuff that we changed as we went along. And now what we're doing is we are starting to do that with teachers for teaching STEM. And now there's an REU for teachers. And I just think that these are things that are really require a lot of collaboration, but once they start happening, the hackathons, and when they see the results of what the students can do, just really change things. Now, let me tell you how this is social justice too. While all this stuff is happening, we started to, they started to reduce our salary. And nobody at the university ever just like, how can we get Congress to listen? How can we get people to listen and really appreciate what UPR has done? And so these two graphs were sent to faculty and across the university and different universities to talk about how important basically the science was being attacked. So basically in 2010, 2011 to 2012, UPR was basically the highest PhD granting institution for Hispanic PhDs that are US citizens and permanent residents, right? So it's really the ones that are, US citizens, right? And basically it started going down, and then it stayed up, always in the top 20. And if you notice, in the last 2 years, these budget cuts have basically made it impossible for us to stay in the top 20. If you notice the numbers, here's the numbers, and I actually have the numbers now for the rest to show the decline, but it's basically hasn't stopped declining. And so that's really a concern in terms of these, because at these levels, there were 300 PhDs in STEM graduating a year, and now we're not even at 150. And so the most drastic change happened if you look between 2015 to 2018. So this 2014 is because there was another protest in 2018, and there was that number. Basically, no numbers were reported in 2018. Nobody graduated, in 2010. And so this is stuff by looking at the data. So now what has happened is we've created an alliance. The professors have actually created an alliance for the science in the UPR. And we're doing a hackathon to try and save high caliber public education in Puerto Rico. So I just think that this is, we're still putting the dates out there. We already have the first date where we're training faculty to get data to show what they're experiencing. And this whole thing that you just mentioned, Renetta, about open, how to work with open data sets. And so we're going to teach them how to work with the NSF and get the data from the NSF website about all the data that's reported to NSF, so that they can, make conclusions. And then we're going to have a hackathon once they have some ideas on, a datathon, I'm sorry, because we're dealing with data, on how to do that. And so let me, just to make a final point, datathon, hackathon. Hackathon is more like innovation. How can you, when we did these, it's like, how can you take the science that you're learning and apply it to something? And then we went to Replicathon, which was like actually following, working with a specific data set and trying to show them what data science is. And now the datathon is, we're going to have people come with hypotheses and use data to basically do evidence-based science to prove whatever point or disprove whatever point they are making. Again, I just want to talk about this is all right now, these hackathons that I'm doing, I'm having a lot of help from women in data science. And I love this because most of the hackathons and datathons in Puerto Rico are predominantly male. And so by working with them, I can make the requirement that all teams have to be 50%. And so these kinds of initiatives are so important. All right, thank you to NSF and NIH and our wonderful collaborators. I didn't mention all the universities we work with, but through the grant, we work with University of Pittsburgh. We work with University of California, Santa Cruz. We work with Harvard University. We work with, just have a long-standing relationship with MIT. And also, I mean, there are many more universities that are coming. UC Davis, of course, with the data carpentries. And so I just can't tell you that none of this would have been, I can't tell you enough how much none of this would have been possible if we didn't have those collaborations. And I tell you to think about that because there are universities right now in this country of minority serving institutions that are getting bomb threats. I never thought I would hear that. HBCUs are getting bomb threats now. And so I really feel like in talking to other universities, like the MSIs are in some way just funds being cut. I've applied for things that I got as a graduate student that being a faculty, I haven't been able to get because as I helped my professor, I just, there's a lack of trust, I think, in giving funding sometimes to MSIs. And so by collaborating with other universities that they do trust, it makes it more possible.